All right, Aaron Schatz in the building, the Chief Analytics Officer of the FTN Network, FTNFantasy.com, FTNBets.com. Unbelievable work, Aaron. As always, we really appreciate your time, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So, can we start here? So, I've seen all this stuff with the Niners and their historic DVOA rankings, and I want to dive into that with you. But is there a brief explainer on DVOA that you can give us that's better than anything I could give?
What is this thing? Okay. You take every play in the NFL season. We look at the success based on down and distance. And then we compare that to a league average baseline that is adjusted for situation and opponent. And thus you get DVOA.
Great. That was very succinct.
Been doing this a while.
Yeah. So the 49ers are historically good DVOA wise. And the first question that comes up for me is like, we know the Niners are good and this and that. We can dive into that. How do you get historic DVOA data and how far back does it go?
We go back to 1981 right now. We're hoping to do 1979 and 1980 soon. We have collected old game books. We have collected old video and transcribed them into play-by-play. We recently bought some video from the NFL Films people to try to do 79 and 80. Like, we've done a lot to go back and get. As far as I know, I'm the only person who has play-by-play from every year from the 80s.
Dang,
wow.
That's incredible.
That's pretty good timing, given the team that we're talking about here.
Yeah, you get to talk about a lot of San Francisco 49ers years, and I think it's something like, I don't remember exactly, but it's something like that they rank in the top 5 of DVOA every single year from 1983 to 1998, something like that.
Wow.
It's like a crazy, ridiculous streak.
Wow. So I'm curious, like, where, because we've talked about this 49ers team having the potential to be maybe as good as the 94 team, just from a pure talent perspective. Obviously, you know, the quarterback situation is a little bit different. You had someone a little bit more established in Steve Young than Brock Purdy, but I think from a production standpoint, you can at least make the comparison. Where are you in terms of where this 49ers team ranks in its own franchise history?
Yeah, I mean, by our numbers, this is the best 49ers team ever right now.
Wow.
I mean, they won't necessarily end that way. You know, we'll see what happens in the last 4 games. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. You know, the 94 team was super hot, awesome in the playoffs. I think it was 89 also that was like super great in the playoffs. Whereas 87 was really, really, really good and then lost their first playoff game. I mean, one of the things you learn doing this is that a franchise's best seasons are not necessarily the seasons they win championships. The best regular seasons, I mean, are not necessarily the seasons where they win championships. You know, the Colts were better in 2004 and 2005, but won a title in 2006. The 49ers were amazing in 87, but they won a title in 88 instead. Like, it happens that way. Patriots, you know, 2007, but they won instead in 2014, you know. So, right now, we have them as the best 49ers team ever, though. And I know it sounds incredible, but their offense is one of the top 7 or 8 offenses that we've ever tracked through this point of the season. And their defense is 4th in the league right now.
So are you measuring that relative to the rest of the league? Like, where the 49? Okay. So not necessarily a direct 1-to-1. Okay.
Every year is normalized. So the average for a year is 0.
Got it.
So the way it works is we're measuring the offense of the current 49ers to the other offenses of 2023. And then we compare them to the offense of, say, the 84 Dolphins, which is compared to the other offenses of 1984, not what offenses look like now.
Okay.
Do you think anybody will ever touch the 2007 Patriots in terms of overall DVOA? They're so far.
If you include the playoffs, the 1991 Redskins are better than they are.
Whoa.
Regular season only, it's the 2007 Patriots. So I don't know what would happen if we were able to do the 60s Packers or even before that. But, in the future, I mean, it might, I'll never say never, but yeah, that team was outstanding.
So how much can you isolate quarterback play from in terms of like evaluating the 49ers and
Well,
like,
that's the magic question, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you can't. I mean, you can't. You can try,
yeah.
but I think that even the Pro Football Focus people would agree that the grades that they give to quarterbacks account in somewhat for the scheme and account somewhat for the receiver. You can't fully separate like that. And that gets to the whole Brock Purdy debate, because who was number one among quarterbacks, among qualifying quarterbacks? So that's 200 or more passes last year. Who was number one in DVOA?
You tell us.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
I was going to say Jimmy.
Oh,
Dang.
Wow.
Right? So when you look at Purdy and the incredible statistics that he's putting up and the incredible efficiency that he's got this year, you say, okay, but then Jimmy Garoppolo was not as good last year, but was very good. And then he went to Las Vegas and was terrible. So how much how much help are you getting from the scheme and the receivers and the, everything else around you?
Do you have an MVP vote?
I do. I am one of the 50 voters for MVP. Yep.
Or can you say which way you'd be leaning, or at least where you fit
right
Brock
now?
Purdy
I
in that
probably would
discussion?
put Prescott first and Purdy second.
What's
I
the
think
difference
Purdy needs
to
to
you?
be on the list, but because of that Garoppolo stat, I just really have a hard time making him number one. It's just, I mean, he's much better than Garoppolo, but Garoppolo was so efficient, and then you brought him somewhere else, and he was terrible. You know what I compared it to earlier this week is the late 90s Minnesota Vikings. The late 90s Minnesota Vikings had 4 straight years where they had a quarterback rank in the top 5 of past DVOA, and it was a different quarterback every year. The receivers and the running back and the offensive line stayed the same, except for Randy Moss showing up in 98. But from 97 to 2000, you had Brad Johnson, and then you had Cunningham, and then you had Jeff George, and then you had Dante Culpepper, and they all had outstanding years, one after the other, in the same offense. But Cunningham was the best of them, just like Purdy is the best of anybody who's been with the 49ers.
Okay, so this segues perfectly into what I wanted to ask. So you look at the Niners, and obviously they're loaded. It's Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. We know all the names. It's not like the Cowboys playmakers are bad. So how do you separate?
But some of it is scheme. Somebody ran a stat earlier this week that if you look just at Brock Purdy's passes behind the line of scrimmage, he has like more EPA per play than any other quarterback in the league.
Yeah,
he does it just about every level.
You look at passes behind the line of scrimmage where he's not doing hardly anything.
Yeah. He also does it every level of the field, though.
Yeah. I'm not saying. I mean, that's the big difference between him and Garoppolo, right? Is the deep passes. Right. He's the best. He's been the most efficient deep passer in the league this year, and Garoppolo didn't have that part of his game, so that's absolutely a difference. But I'm just saying, that shows you just how much those passes, those behind the line of scrimmage yak passes, are important to the ridiculousness of the numbers that Purdy has put up.
Would you real quick? Let me. I want to. I'm on the Tyreek Hill MVP train. Is that a possibility if he clears like 2,000 yards?
I'm
to, let's say 23 touchdowns.
50 voters, and they're not all like analytics heads like me. I don't know whether I would put him on my ballot or not. I'm thinking about it a little bit and trying to do some work on like just how much can a wide receiver matter. I mean, obviously he mattered a lot last week. He went out of the game and the Miami offense basically shut down. So I will say, and this is not meant any disrespect to Christian McCaffrey, I think I would be more likely to put Hill on my ballot than McCaffrey.
I think that's fair. Looking at the DVOA rankings up at FTN Fantasy right now, the Niners are 5 percentage points in non-adjusted DVOA ahead of Baltimore, who's the second best team in the NFL according to that metric. Can you give us some context to what that 5% difference means? Just how
it's
unique
not
is
actually
it?
A lot, really. I mean, we love Baltimore. My numbers love Baltimore more than any other advanced metric out there. Like, I will fully admit, I am kind of on an island when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens, but they have had some huge wins over good teams, and their wins tend to have all the scoring in the first 3 quarters. they don't do a lot of garbage time scoring. Right. So they're like legit 38-3 victories, not like 24-3. And then they go and score 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Like when Miami beat Denver by, with 70 points, a lot of that was fourth quarter when the game was already over.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the Eagles, I think 11th. Can
eighth.
you just?
We have them 8th right now.
Oh, 8th. Okay, I think I counted 11 and non-adjust. Anyway, but that obviously speaks to. I mean, that there's a difference there between where they've been in quote unquote power rankings throughout most of the year and obviously the standings. What's the discrepancy between how the Eagles
that's
have
just close
played?
wins. I mean, like they beat the Patriots by 5. Right? They've had close wins against the Commanders. They haven't had that many big wins over even bad teams, let alone good teams. And then they went out the last couple of weeks and they lost big to good teams, right? So we had them about 8th 2 weeks ago, and then they went out and had 2 big losses, and now we still have them about 8th. Like it hasn't changed how we feel about them. They're like the 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC. I mean, subjectively, I would put them ahead of Detroit, but they're pretty clearly the 3rd best team in the NFC, and they were 2 weeks ago too, frankly.
Is there ever a team that you see like week in and week out and you watch them and maybe one way or the other, you think, hey, this team's really good, and then DVOA just doesn't agree with that, or vice versa? Is there a team you're thinking, man, this is not very good, and then the numbers flesh out where, you know what?
Yeah, I mean, I think this year the team that's like that is Pittsburgh. DVOA is surprisingly copacetic on the issue of the Pittsburgh offense, partially because they've played such a hard schedule of opposing defenses. It thinks their offense is basically average. And obviously the points scored numbers don't show that. And when you watch it, it certainly doesn't look like that. But, DVOA is seeing something in the sort of, that they've had it hard. They've had it difficult. There's a reason why they have a winning record,
Yeah. What's the correlation between teams that finish, maybe top 1, 2, or 3 in the regular season in DVOA and teams that win the Super Bowl?
It's a shockingly bad correlation between teams that finish number 1 and teams that win the Super Bowl in the last 15 or 20 years. Before that, the team that finished number 1 won the Super Bowl over and over again. In the last few years, they haven't, but a lot of teams that were 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And I still think it's better to be the best team. Like, upsets happen, but it's better to be the best team. Like, the team with the biggest chance of winning the Super Bowl is San Francisco. Like, I don't care that the number 1 team hasn't won in X number of years. They're the best team. The best team has the best chances. That's how it is.
Sure. You said there was a string of years where the number 1 team won, and then now it's been however many years since they have. Do you think there's a reason for that? Like, are teams just getting smarter, or is
No, I think it's random variation. There've been some really dominant regular season teams like the 2019 Ravens that just went to the playoffs and lost.
Yeah. Dang.
What are you going to do? The Chiefs, the Chiefs in 2018, right? They lost to the Patriots very close in overtime in the AFC Championship game. That's not the fact that they lost an overtime game in the semifinals is not a harsher on the stats, right?
Yeah, right.
So I'm looking at the offensive numbers right now, and the Niners are clearly first. They're almost 13 percentage points ahead of Miami, number 2 offensively. Can you give us some context into what that gap means historically?
A lot. I mean, San Francisco is the 7th best offense that we've ever tracked through 13 games, and Miami is, where the second place usually is. 22.5%. That's very good, but I mean, they're not near the San Francisco offense is just absurdly efficient this year.
What Miami being at that far down is kind of surprising to me. And I don't mean that far down. It's not like they're bad.
It's slowed down from the early part of the season. Their offense has slowed down in the last few weeks. It's definitely not getting what it did in the early days.
So would you
go ahead.
Would you right now? I'm not talking.
Okay. It like when you go into, when the playoffs are coming, and obviously there's still a month left of the regular season, but when you try to forecast, or I don't even know if you do try to forecast, but when the playoffs start, is it as simple for you as, well, I'm going to pick the number 1 DVOA team to win the Super Bowl?
Pretty much. I mean, it's different if the number 1 team doesn't have the number 1 seed, because you do have to account for home field advantage and you do have to account for the bye week. If the number one, if the number three, if the 1, 2, and 3 were close together and number 3 had the 1 seed, then that's the team I would pick to win the Super Bowl. But this year, I think San Francisco is probably going to end up with the 1 seed, and they're the best team, and they're my pick.
So if you had to pick the AFC team right now, are you leaning Baltimore? You said you're a big fan of them.
I'm definitely leaning Baltimore, especially because that Miami loss to Tennessee made it much more likely that Baltimore will also get the 1 seed.
All right, I think that's all I got. You have anything else, Kyle?
Yeah, I don't think so. I get the Brock Purdy stuff. The Niners historically that was awesome, and an explainer on DVOA that we can just replay when we bring it up.
Absolutely,
you're welcome,
Aaron. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, man, and hopefully we'll talk to you again down the road.
Definitely. FTNfantasy.com/DVOA is where you find my stuff. And if you want to get all the historical DVOA numbers and all the splits for this year and all of the advanced stuff, you want to get an FTN Stats Plus or Fantasy Plus subscription. And that gets you all the advanced DVOA numbers, my picks against the spread each week, so on and so forth.
There's no better numbers out there. Thanks so much, Aaron.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks,
man.